What is up, everybody? This is episode 4 of the Dream Share podcast. Yes, as you can see, this is going to be a solo podcast. I've been requested by many people to answer some questions and kind of elaborate on some ideas on the whole gist of making a t-shirt, printing, clothing brands, all that general stuff, design, files, garments, all that stuff. I'm going to try and throw in as much as possible into this podcast. Um, so, one general thing that I want to kind of answer is kind of like the background information about who I am and what I've done and why you should even listen to this podcast and my advice. I've been a printer and ran a printing company for the past 3 years, Dream Shirt Studios. Um, in the first 2.5 years, I was a broker. So a broker is basically somebody that grabs orders from clientele, organizes all that order information, and sends it out to a printer for them to print. Now I currently do everything myself, but that's how I used to do everything. So technically, in a way, I was doing what a clothing brand would do to a printer. I was just the middleman. And I very much put on to myself that I would be the best middleman ever. A lot of people didn't even notice that I was a middleman, specifically because I was literally so good at being a middleman that both printers gave me a office into their shop. I was their graphic designer, and I did all the graphic design work for all of my jobs, under the color separations. I reworked designs if needed. But I have that information as far as being a graphic designer. I've also been a graphic designer for the past 7 years. I studied graphic design in college. I learned most of my stuff off YouTube, which is where this interview or this podcast is going to be on. But I really do want to give back. I learned so much off of YouTube, and that's why I just want to share everything that I have collectively to you guys. But so Dream Shirt Studios originally was made for shirts to be, dream-like. They're the perfect imagination of what you expected your shirts to be. Does it have to be just shirts? It could be hats, could be anything about clothing. But that's exactly that translated to Dream Shirt Podcast. It's the same idea, same philosophy. And I hope that I have good information. And I've talked to many people, and I think that there is a lot of information for me to give, especially looking back and seeing how much I have learned and how many questions I can answer, compared to where I was at 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember Brian Cabreras from Cabrera Clásicos in episode 2 was talking about how, years ago he was, a beginner. And I feel like I can relate to that so easily because I feel like everyone starts there. And, maybe that's where you're at watching this video. But let's just dive right into it. I have a reel on my Instagram that kind of shows you the 3 things that you should kind of know and research when it comes to making a t-shirt or making anything. But let's just use t-shirts as a good example. T-shirts are basic. Everyone does t-shirts. But the 3 things that I said in the reel were I would research into how to make a good graphic. There's many resources on YouTube, but that very much has to do with resolution. But we'll dive into each one. So 1 is design, 2 is blanks. Blanks are incredibly important. Blanks are the blank tee or the blank garment that you get from the printer, or if you have a wholesale license, you can get them yourself. But they are basically the canvases that the design goes onto. And they are the feel. This is going to be a WATC t-shirt, and it has a different feel. If I wear a Gildan t-shirt, you would look at me as if, differently, because obviously this has a baggier look to it, but that's what the power of the garment does. Anyways, number 3 that I said on my reel was a printer. And I mean, I feel like a lot of people are probably like, obviously design makes sense, garment makes sense, but the printer, why are we talking about printer when it comes to clothing brands? I feel like one thing that people do underestimate is the impact the printer you choose goes into the result of the actual garment. I mean, obviously the process goes like you start the design, you have the idea, you either design yourself through Photoshop, Illustrator, Corel Draw, any of those design softwares, or you send your design out, you send your idea out to a designer, they design it, and they send it out to you, you send it to your printer, but that's still part of the process. You definitely have all the responsibility of making your design as quality as possible. And then you choose the garment that it goes on, and then you choose the printer that it goes on. The printer, as far as me, um, the way that I view it, I've worked with printers and I've worked with different printers, and I see how different kind of the whole process goes. And one thing that I would tell you is that every printer is still human. And I feel like they they very much get in my years that I've seen and dealt with printers, a lot of emotion goes into the whole emotion of the printers go into quality. And I know that that is kind of weird to say as far as like a service-based industry having to deal with human emotion. But that's just what it is. I've dealt with so many printers, and you can definitely tell quality goes up when the relationship of that relationship with the printer, and let's just say me, I was a printer, but I had the relationship with the printer. When our relationship was good, everything worked out very well. When we were having a little bit of disputes, some things would, not work out the way that everything we wanted to. Um, but I say that really to kind of bring emphasis to how your relationship is with your printer. So let's go back. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, and we'll really dive into all of them. The design, I'm going to start putting up some graphics here so you can actually see it. But there are different types of file types that you should know. There's JPEG, which I believe is the worst or potential worst. Then there goes PNG. The main differences between those two, JPEG is always going to be flattened. So for example, it's always going to have a white background with the graphic flattened. So the background's going to be, as part of the design as the design is on the file. A PNG can separate the file and the background. So you can send your design without being flattened to a white background. And if I'm having preferences, yeah, PNG is going to be the best one. Because for example, if you have a fade on your design and you send it as a JPEG, that fade is going to be stamped or flattened with the background. So that fade isn't going to be as seamless as it would as a PNG. But PNGs and JPEGs have similar qualities. They're non-editable as far as elements go. You can't like take out the the top lettering of a t-shirt design. I'll show something, but they're everything is flattened as far as JPEG and PNGs go. But with the PNGs, you can send it with a transparent background. If a printer asks you for a PNG, or at least not having a background, I would send it as a PNG, a PDF, or a PSD, or an AI. So let's get into those. So above the PNG is a PSD. A PSD is a Photoshop document. Obviously, you can only have PSDs through, or you can make PSDs through Photoshop. But with a PSD, the elements are editable. So say, for example, you have a design with letters on the top, a whole bunch of different people, football team, for example, on it. You can turn off the layers and turn on the layers of the PSD, and it's completely editable, which most of the time results into higher quality, especially because in Photoshop you can adjust resolution. And let me get into resolution real quick. So resolution is a number. That number means pixels per inch. People call it dots per inch. People call it lines per inch, DPI, LPI, or PPI, pixels per inch. So a lot of the images you see on Google, or as long as like as far as like if you save a design or save a file or save a picture from Google, the resolution is going to be 72 most of the time. And 72 pixels means 72 of those little blocks in the Photoshop file or any file besides vector. If the file is 72 pixels or 72 resolution, there's 72 blocks per inch that make up the file. So with that number, you can see that the higher the number goes per inch, the more information Photoshop has to work with the design to make up the design. For example, if you had a circle and you made it up out of 36 squares, then you can see the blocks around that circle around the edges. But if you had a circle that was made up of 4,800 squares, you wouldn't be able to see those blocks because they would be so small that they would appear as curves. So with that idea, that's resolution. And when you send your files to your printers, you want to have at least 300 resolution. I've worked with many clients and I've seen a lot of different files. But I would recommend at the least, if you want your design to be really good quality, I would recommend 300 resolution to size. So if you are considering doing a jumbo print, let's just say for our print size, our jumbos are 16 inches by 20 inches. If you want a design that big, 16 by 20, make the file or the brand new document in Photoshop, if you have Photoshop or Illustrator, and we'll talk about Photoshop or some of resolution. Make the new document 16 by 20 and have the resolution at 300 and work from there and bring all your assets into there because that's actually to size. And if you make a 8 by 4 square and you make the design in there and send it to your printer, he's going to blow it up, or she going to blow it up to 16 by 20 and it's going to change. When you blow up any design in Photoshop, it Photoshop generates information that it's not, that it's generating. It doesn't know, it's guessing. And I mean, that's where it leads to different things being in the file that you necessarily didn't want. So I think of success for me is getting the screen print to be as close to the file as possible. And you, as far as the designer or the clothing brand that sends the design, has a lot to do with that. Obviously, there is some responsibility on the printer to translate it as best as possible, but we can't. A mediocre design will translate to a mediocre print. It just is what it is. I would very much recommend 300 resolution and up. You can go from 300. I would say this second tier is, you can go 300, 400, 500, 600. But your computer kind of has to handle that. So then there's that. And you have to know, and this is a recommendation for research. I would recommend kind of researching the different printing methods, because if you're wanting to do DTG, then you don't have to worry too much about the file. Not like you don't, but you don't have to worry as much as screen print, because screen print, it's a lot of human translations. There is a human doing the separation. So grabbing the black of where you think is the black. And with DTG, all you do is put that file into the printer just poops it out. But with a screen print, a human being has to translate whatever your design is to physical, real separations and separating the colors to go exactly what they are. So it leads to more human error. That's what I'm trying to say. I would recommend, researching graphic design as far as resolution. Take what I just gave you and kind of look up resolution. What is resolution for files? If you have any questions as far as specifics go ahead and answer in the comments, and I'll go ahead and try and answer as best as I can. Then there's that. So we'll talk about screen print now, because I feel like most people want to try and research screen print, and especially there's way more to research with screen print because it's so much more complicated. But there are 3 types of separations as far as the most populars go. Um, so first one, most basic, most simple, is going to be spot color separation. I'll show you some images right now, but spot color separation is the most simplest because there is no halftones. There is not much you have to do as far as editing the design or human, translations, because it's simply just like, let's just say you have letters on a t-shirt. It's, what's white and what's black. If it's white text on black t-shirts, it's spot color. Super simple, just copy, paste. You can do multiple colors with spot color. There's no problem. You can do a 12 color spot color separation. Possible. I've done it before. But then there's spot color. There's 3 of them. Second one is simulated process. Simulated process deals with halftones and gradients, mainly halftones. So if you have this real face, for example, you're screen printing, it's going to be consisted of halftones, just halftones. Halftones are these little dots that make up shades and shapes and dimension. And most high detail t-shirts that you see that are screen printed are going to be simulated process. And then the third one is, simulated process is high detail, so is index. Index is a pixel-based separation. So no halftones, but all these little squares that make up the entire design. And it's mostly done through Photoshop. I have a YouTube video if you guys want to check it out on how to do index separations, so you kind of get a good idea what index separations are. But index does do high detail. It's mainly kind of used for high color or multicolor prints, 8 to 12, but you can do less. But index is kind of like old school. Not many people do it nowadays. I've done multiple, but I just kind of lean more to simulated process. So those are the 3 types of separations. And yeah, as far as trying to give any more graphic design advice, like I would, as far as being a clothing brand owner, I would get Adobe, I would get Photoshop, even if you're not going to be the main designer of your brand. Like if you're going to send it out to a designer on Instagram or Fiverr or something like that, I would still want to know how graphics work, like it's a huge part of being a clothing brand, knowing what graphics are, and kind of like, what if your printer is like, hey, I need you to edit this real quick, and your graphic designer is busy, it's going to take 4 more days and it's a simple edit. I mean, I would want to know that if I was a clothing brand owner. And I would recommend being your own graphic designer because it will get you more intimate and more close to your designs. Obviously, if you don't care, go ahead and just send out your designs, which is totally fine. There's many $1 million brands that just they outsource. But yeah, the best softwares I would recommend are Photoshop and Illustrator. I bounce back between those 2, very much so. It has Lightroom, so if you want to take product photos, you can edit your photos through Lightroom or Photoshop. But I would say if you're a clothing brand owner, Adobe is essential, I would say. But you do you. But that's basically that for graphic design. Resolution is incredibly important, 300 resolution plus. Send your files to size. And yeah, that's another thing. A lot of clothing brand owners don't even know the size. They just kind of make the mock-up. Another thing about graphic design is making mock-ups. You want to make a mock-up, one, to for content, to use for selling, and that goes into graphic design. You can just do mock-ups for your designs and you can set out your designs. But like I would recommend getting Adobe. How mock-ups help you? Like a lot of brand owners don't even know what size they want on the design on the actual shirt. Like this is, I believe, 7 inches wide. But I would recommend measuring your designs before, like measuring a blank t-shirt and picturing your design on it, or print your design on a white piece of paper, cut it out as close to the borders as possible, and put it on a t-shirt if it's less than 8.5 by 11. But that's another thing that you want to provide to your printer, because sometimes your printer looks at the mock-up and gets it an inch wrong, and then everyone's like, yo, what happened? But it's like, we're kind of guessing as well. We're guessing just as much as you. Obviously, we have more experience because we kind of engage better from our experiences. But it's never perfect. If you want, if you specifically wanted 7 inches and the printer printed at 7 inches, then everyone's on the same page. I would recommend sending a certain size to your printer as well. But there's graphic design. If you have any questions about graphic design, drop them in the comments and I'll answer them as well. But number 2 is blanks. So blanks, there's many brands. There's many different brands for many different garments, as far as like t-shirts, hoodies, sweatpants, socks, anything really, women's clothes. Like there are many blanks for a lot of stuff. It is limited. Obviously, everything's pre-made, so you can't go super custom. But that's what blanks are. Blanks are these little preset t-shirts that you could borrow their aesthetic for your brand. So I would, if I were a clothing brand, and this is what I basically did, I put myself in a position to be able to research a lot of these different brands. I have a rack here in my lobby right on my right, and I do recommend, if you are local to Buena Park, please come on down and check out the blanks that I've gathered over the years. There are at least 20 different t-shirts here, different companies that make t-shirts. But I guess what I want to say about garments is people also underestimate garments. Everyone focuses on the design and they think the design sells, but people don't understand that the garment, and there is a controversy about this and how much percentage the garment has to do with how it sells or how it feels. But I would say it's 50-50. Like I think the garment is the subconscious feeling of a t-shirt. Like you look at the t-shirt in public and you're like, oh, I like the design. But behind your head, you kind of know like, oh, that fit looks nice. Or as far as like, oh, it's baggy or it's not baggy or it's tight. That's where like the garment comes in, because that's the feeling of the shirt. The design is basically kind of like that surface level feeling where it's like, oh, it has Kobe Bryant on it. I know what he's like. But it's like, oh, if he has an oversized tee, you don't necessarily like think of it like, oh, he has an oversized tee, he must be cool, or like kind of have that like streetwear vibe. It just kind of comes to you naturally. Design is more service level. I would say garment is very much more under level. And there's a lot that goes into garments. There is the fit, how it fits you, the color. I mean, you can just say, oh, what if it is black? No, every color, every t-shirt blank has a different black. Like some are super stark black, some are like faded black, some are like blue black. But those are the things that you do want to kind of research. You want to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Third is price point. How much is that blank going to cost you? I would recommend, doing those little, like ask the printer you're printing with, hey, how much is Comfort Colors? How much is LA Apparel? How much is Hanes Beefy? How much is Guild and Hammer? How much is Guild and Heavy Cotton? How much is WATC? Like there is, I don't know. I work specifically with probably like 20, 30 brands, but there's probably hundreds, maybe thousands. Yeah, probably. But I would do my research, go on YouTube, look up, the most popular blanks, or come on down to Dream Shooter Studios in Buena Park. I got all of them right here. But that goes for garment. Definitely kind of do your research on the fit, because that's super important. Like, and if you're a brand, I would, if you're trying to like stick with a vibe, stick with a blank that matches your vibe. Or if you want to kind of like experiment as far as like honing in on a vibe, then I would recommend looking at other blanks. Like, if you're strictly a streetwear brand that does cool graphics, use LA Apparel. But like, if you're using LA Apparel and you have this one design that's kind of like beachy and you don't necessarily need it on a heavy or a super heavy garment, then look at other blanks, because every blank has its own vibe. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it. It's like, you want to study the vibe of the blank and make sure that it aligns with your brand, or at least the design that you're going to be printing. But don't box yourself in unless you want to. Unless you're like, hey, I want a strict vibe throughout the entire thing, and stick with the same blank, honestly. But yeah, that's all I got to say about garments. I love them. I can research them all day. But yeah, I would recommend feeling them, going in and really wearing them, wash test them, make sure they're the right shirt. Because just think about all the shirts that you have in your closet. Like, when you see that one shirt, you're like, oh, I know that that's going to fit right. I know that's comfortable for me. Or if it's a super hot day, you think to yourself, oh, I want to wear that shirt because it's thin. I know I'm not going to sweat in it. Like, think about the shirts that you've already bought in your closet. And if you're a clothing brand owner, you want to sell shirts. So it's like, look at what you've bought and reverse that, and kind of give the customer the reason to buy it. But that has a lot to do with the garment, has a lot to do with the design. It's 50-50. But the third thing is the printer. The printer is incredibly important. And the way that I think about the relationship with the clothing brand and the printer is, I believe the clothing brand is the main one. He's the rapper of the music industry. He's the artist. He's the one that does the promotions and, is the face of whatever. But the printer is the producer. He makes the beats, or he's the sound mixer, or somewhere in the behind the scenes. But, a song isn't a song without a beat. And I feel like most clothing brand owners don't really think about the printer at all when they think about the success of their brand. They just pick whatever printer they want to use. But at the same time, it's like, you realize that you're giving this person all the power in the world to translate your design. You don't want to choose the cheapest person. You don't want to choose somebody because they're $2 off of the other quote, because if they don't do your job right, that could cost your entire brand. So it's like, be smart about your printer. I would recommend not choosing the cheapest. And I would recommend asking a whole bunch of questions. I know that it's annoying, and of course, I'm the printer. I've gotten all the questions. But I mean, one, do your research. Don't ask questions that, like, I guess are dumb. I wouldn't ask, how much does it cost to make a shirt? First question. Like, don't ask that, because there's so many things that go into pricing. But like, ask to see examples of like what you want to get done. Like, make sure that they can do what you want. If you're gonna, like, for example, we're talking about separations. If you have a design that's going to be simulated in process and all halftones, make sure you can know that they do halftones. There is a lot that goes into doing a simulated process. You have to have 300 mesh. You have to have good pressure as far as being a screen printer. If he's doing basic stuff all the time and you give him a gradient design that has so much detail, you're not going to be able to know what to do with it. Even if the prices are cheaper for a reason. Remember that. And really, like, think about how you go into that experience, because I've seen many I've talked to many brands where their first printer was terrible and they suffered in their first drop because they had to either refund all their people or none of them came out right. But a printer can make or break your brand. It really is honest. And obviously I try my best to give the customer and the clients the best experience possible. Ask the questions that I need from them. But get a printer that does ask you questions and make sure that you get what you want. Um, but yeah. And, as far as we're talking about printers, there is different printing methods. There's screen printing, there's DTG, and there's heat press, and there's embroidery, and there's vinyl, and all that stuff. But I would say the top four, as far as the industry goes: screen print, DTG, embroidery, and heat press, or DTF. Heat press and DTF are kind of one and the same. You can't do DTF without a heat press, but it's not the only thing you can heat press. Anyways, screen printing, I would say the advantages and the pros and cons of screen printing are going to be longevity for screen printing. It'll last you the longest. It lasts longer than DTG and DTF as far as how many washes it can go through with still having the integrity of the design. But the cons of screen printing, another pro of screen printing is the color, the vibrancy of the design. It pops out. It sits on top. This is a DTG, but screen print is like really, like, for example, this is DTG. You can see how the light reflects off of the design, but this is screen print. It's much brighter because screen print is molten plastic. It reflects light a little bit differently. That's why it pops more. And then the con of screen printing would be the price, or the minimum order quantity. Some people, minimum order quantity is 24, but some people are 50, some people are 100. With DTG, the main pro is there is no MOQ. There is no minimum order quantity. You can get one, and it might be the same price as 50. But that's also a con. I've explained this before, but I'll explain it again. At a certain point, the screen print is going to be high as far as price goes when it starts off at the minimum. Like, for a jumbo multicolor front and back could possibly, this is the not worst case scenario, but like highest price case scenario. Shirts can come out to like $60 each at 24 if you get 12 color front and back jumbo. But with that same 12 color front and back jumbo on a DTG, it would cost you $30. So there is that. But then eventually, let's just say DTG stays at 30, screen print would eventually beat it when it gets to $29 each. And that could be possibly a quantity order of 75. And then there's heat press, or DTF. DTF has very vibrant colors for sure. The one con of it, that it has this certain, it definitely reflects the light very shiny. People call it very shiny. People say that it feels like a piece of paper is glued onto your shirt. There are solutions to that. But yeah, I would for sure say that screen printing is more popular for a specific reason. It just looks the best, in my opinion. I could be wrong, just certain things, but I would say that there are certain situations, as far as like my clothing brand, if I were to make a specific design, there are certain designs that look better with DTG. For example, I just shot the Padres tee. I didn't know how much it was going to sell, so I just did DTG, because I was like, all right, well, if I sell 5, then I could do it with no worry. That's the advantage, and I would recommend starting off your clothing brand with DTG, because you have that liberty of peace of mind with not knowing how much you're going to sell, and whatever sells, you can just, you can do 5 and you'll still make profit. When you're starting off and you want to do multicolored designs, when you go into screen print, you're digging yourself into a bit of a hole, because when you're starting off, There are certain brands that sell right away, but there are most of them that don't. And if you sit with inventory, you can get discouraged, or you can just simply run out of money when you're stacking up on inventory that you don't sell. And I feel like it's more fun to be a clothing brand starting off with DTG because you don't have that unnecessary stress. Or you can do DTF. The minimum for DTF is 10. But like, I would say this is one thing that I would give you for DTF. Like, if you're going to be doing a small design, for example, a super high intense design that's super detailed on the sleeve, like multicolored, just do DTF. Like, it's like those super small designs. They're like this big with super high detail. I wouldn't even recommend DTG. I think DTF just looks better. And the con of DTF is that it feels like paper, but it's like when it's small, you can't necessarily feel it compared to the whole scope of the t-shirt. You can only feel a DTF basically when it's like 6 inches wide, and you feel like that heat compared to the rest of the shirt. But DTF does have its advantages, and I would say I would choose DTF in specific situations over screen print. For example, I did a Bad Bunny tee, and on the back it was a 3-color design, and I really wanted to add this small little frog. I'll put it up, but I wanted to add this small little frog on the shirt. But I was like, man, if I screen print this, I'm gonna have to add like 8 more screens, and I just didn't have the room. So I was like, well, I could do DTF, and I did that, and a lot of people loved it. So it's like, I said this last time, and I'll say it again, but it's like, if your client likes the result, as far as you're a clothing brand owner, you sell to clients, and that client comes back to you as like, dude, this shit's dope. Like, you have nothing to worry about when you choose your printing method. If as long as it looks good and your people are happy, it's all that matters, really. And I would recommend kind of asking your printer, hey, like, what would you do in this situation? Like, how could I save the most money here? Like, it's a simple question. How could I save the most money? It's not a bad question. If you have a 12-color design, like if you brought down to 8, some printers would just be like, hey, it's 12 colors. Let's do 12 colors. But it's like, you can make it probably like 80% accurate from the original design with 8 colors rather than 12, and it saves you $140. That's a guess, but somewhere around there. It's like, ask your printer, and the more you know, the more you can save money. I can go DTG off of a 12 color if I'm selling 20 rather than doing 30 with a screen print, unless you want to have that inventory that you're going to sell for a pop-up, go ahead. But it's like, those are all these little intricate things that as a clothing brand owner that you can do to save yourself some money and to make sure your clients are happy. There are certain designs that it looks better on DTG. I'll be honest. I will. Like, it's just when it's super high detail, super small little, as far as you're doing human faces, like, it's kind of difficult. It's more difficult for sure to do high colored faces or high detailed faces with screen print than it is with DTG. There's so much more that goes into making it look very good with screen print, and just make sure you got a screen printer that's willing to do that kind of work. Like, but I do brag about DTG because I have a great DTG guy. I've worked with DTG printers that aren't that good, and they have different machines that just don't produce the same kind of high quality as my guy. But it's like, that's another thing, The other thing is finding the right printer. Like, it's not the other thing, it's obviously the thing. But there are, like, I will tell you this, the quality of the print pretty much correlates with how much the printer cares. And that's straight up. That's honest. From a printer coming to telling you it's a clothing brand, the quality of the print very much correlates with how much the printer cares. And not only how much the print shop, but the person that's literally printing your job. If they're doing it manually, like, They could print it and not even check and just spin, keep on going. They don't care, and they're just printing. And something comes out wrong, and they're like, whatever. But there are, you can find a real good printer where they print and they check for every color. They make sure, they tape up pinholes. They make sure the Pantone is exactly matched. Like, that's what the result comes out to, how much the printer cares. So if you're with a current printer that's necessarily not like answering your questions and doing all like the good customer service stuff, look for a different printer. Come to Dream Studios. Like, I really do care. Obviously, it's why I'm making this video. But like, the more you really, really get into the nitty gritty of like what makes a good t-shirt, it has everything to do with all of what I've talked about. Like, make sure your design's right. Send your design at 300 plus resolution at 2 size. Pick a good vibe for your t-shirt, like garment. Really, like, take your time. Go into, order samples from different companies and make sure that it's the right one for you, because every single shirt is very different. Not only the vibe, but it's also like how you feel in it, how it fits you, when you're running, or how it fits you when you're working out, or how it fits you when you're walking in Disneyland. Like, those all kind of matter when you're making a t-shirt. If you're having, let's just say, for example, if you're a Disneyland strictly clothing brand, you want to make sure that you feel good when people wear your shirts at Disneyland. This is an example. But that's a garment. And then printers, like I just said, make sure you got a printer that cares, knows that he can do a design like you're sending, and, be in very good communication with them. But yeah, those are the 3 things. I guess another thing that I would just want to say is, if you're going to be a clothing brand owner and you really want to be successful, I've learned this from many people, and I have mentors that teach me this, but like, really, if you're going to be a clothing brand owner, really care about your brand. Like, just as much as a printer, the print result comes out of how much the printer cares. The clothing brand result comes out of how much the clothing brand owner cares. And you really only care if you're having a brand that really speaks to you personally. Like, don't make a Catholic church brand if you're not even Catholic or religious. Like, you know what I mean? Or don't make a clothing brand that has to do with pop culture if you've never watched a movie before. Like, you want to, I made Frank Ocean shirt because I was like, I really love Frank Ocean. Or I made a Padres tee because I was like, I really love the Padres. And you can see that. I mean, as far as I've seen it, and I've worked with many different brands. Like, I've worked with many brands that made, cartoon shows, and they really seem that they love those cartoons. And I can see that translation in results, because they can promote it as if they really, really wanted it to go out into the world. And they promote it as if the world needs it. And I feel like there's the difference between a brand owner that really, really cares about his product and one that doesn't, because they're like, oh man, I just wanted the money and it didn't make me money. Fuck, I guess I got to give up. And it's like, that's what happens if you don't care about your brand. So I would recommend, really, if you don't have a brand yet and you're still thinking about making a brand, really, really, really hone in on you and make sure that the brand really speaks to you, and then create a community of people that are like you, and really speak to them and speak to their pain points and speak to their destination of where they can go with your clothing brand. And this goes for all business, but really make a community of people that support you in your love for whatever your clothing brand speaks to. But yeah, I guess I'm going to wrap it up, and I would love to do another one of these if you guys really like something like this. But if you guys have any like questions for my next one, for my solo podcast, if you guys really want this, feel free to drop them in the comments. I can definitely go straight up Q&A for my next one if you guys want. But I'm totally willing to answer any questions and really dive in, because I want this to be a community, just like I said, of people that are curious, just like I was when I was 18, and really try and figure out this whole how to make a t-shirt thing and make it as simple as possible for anybody that's trying to start. But thank you guys so much for watching. And if you got this far, I really do appreciate it. But I really hope that you got something out of it. And if you didn't, please let me know what you want to get out of it. And I'm more than happy to dive into any subject as far as t-shirts and clothing brands and printing goes. But thank you again. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.